Hi everybody, this is Mr. Zoeller, and I'm going to be presenting to you a screencast today on the Fugitive Slave Act, Uncle Tom's Cabin. So the Fugitive Slave Act, if we remember, is part of the Compromise of 1850. So for our objective for today's video, so the first objective you have is that students can analyze the impact of the Fugitive Slave Act and Uncle Tom's Cabin on northern and southern states. So here we have two pictures representing Harriet Tubman, who was considered one of the founders and heroines of the Underground Railroad, whereas she was going into the South and helping slaves escape to freedom in the North. And this is what the Fugitive Slave Law is going to be passed about, since Southerners are losing their property, their slaves, and just because their slaves are in the North, Southerners believe they should have the right to get them back. Just like if somebody stole your property, you have the right to get your property back. So this is the reason why Southerners want to add a fugitive slave law, is to get their slaves. So the Fugitive Slave Act is going to make it a crime to help runaway slaves. So any Americans that are involved in the Underground Railroad helping slaves to escape could be arrested. And it also allowed officials to arrest runaway slaves in free areas, which means even if you're a runaway slave and you make it to the North where there is no slavery, you could still be arrested and brought back to the South. And so suspected slaves would be brought before judges who would decide if they were free or not. Judges got $5 for freeing the slave and $10 for sending them back to their former owners. So the unfairness of the judges and the sending of free African Americans back into slavery horrified many Northerners. So there were many African Americans that were free in the North, that were born free, never were a slave. And if they're accused of being a slave, they don't have the right to testify in court, and they could be sent south into the South as a slave, even though they never were a slave themselves. So here's a sign that you would find in the North, and this one in particular in Boston, warning that all colored people in Boston be careful for watchmen and police and others who are coming to kidnap them and bring them to the South as slaves. And just a warning to everybody. And you can see when it posted here, April 24th, 1851. So this is in response to the Fugitive Slave Act, which is part of the Compromise of 18. So go ahead and take a look at that, read through that, pause the video if you need to. So in response to the Fugitive Slave Act, we're going to have a novel that is that is written by Harriet Beecher Stowe called Uncle Tom's Cabin. And this is going to be a very influential piece of literature that's going to sway many Northerners to now support the abolitionist movement, which the mission of the abolitionist movement is to end slavery in the United States. So here's a picture of Harriet Beecher Stowe. So fiction also informed people about the evils of slavery, since many Northerners never have been in the South and they don't know what slavery really looks like. So in Uncle Tom's Cabin, this anti-slavery novel, which is written by Harriet Beecher Stowe here, spoke out powerfully against slavery. The Fugitive Slave Act greatly angered Stowe. She decided to write a book that would educate Northerners about the realities of slavery. Uncle Tom's Cabin was published in 1852. The main character's name is Tom, who is a very kind slave, and Harriet Beecher Stowe uses a lot of imagery of Jesus Christ in her novel, and Tom as sacrificing himself for others, loving others. So she tries to make Tom seem like a Christ-like figure in the book. And so Tom is taken from his wife and sold downriver, which means down the Mississippi in Louisiana. And at the end of the novel, Tom becomes a slave of a cruel slave owner named Simon Legree. And in the end of the book, Legree has Tom beaten to death right before Tom could have been freed. This is a really powerful book, definitely an anti-slavery novel. And within a decade, so within 10 years, more than 2 million copies of Uncle Tom's Cabin had been sold in the United States. And the book's popularity caused one Northerner to remark that Stowe and her book had created 2 millions of abolitionists. And even Abraham Lincoln, when he met with Harriet Beecher Stowe, said, "Oh, this is the woman who's started the Civil War." So she had a great influence on the view of slavery in the United States. Now in the southern states, Uncle Tom's Cabin was burned. It was banned. You weren't allowed to read it. You weren't allowed to own it. And then many Southern writers decided that we needed to write our own novels about slavery so that Northerners can see our view of what slavery is like. And in their novels, they write about slaves that were happy and content, and that their owners were very merciful and kind and loving over them. And in contrast to Harriet Beecher Stowe's book of Uncle Tom's Cabin. So here is a poster representing Uncle Tom's Cabin for sale. So if you just look at that, you can see different languages listed down below. And then here's a picture showing a child being taken from her mother, which is one of the more horrific parts of slavery, when families are separated from one another. And then here's our responses from Southerners. We have Aunt Phyllis's cabin, Southern life as it is. And you can see this slave who's dressed really nice, and this kind master and his wife looking down upon him. And then these slaves are dancing and happy and joyful. Everything looks great. And then we have the cabin and parlor, or slaves and masters, and talk about how loving the masters are. So these are all responses of the Southerners to Uncle Tom's Cabin. So I want you to go ahead and answer these questions for numbers 1 through 7. And when you're done, I'll have a next video ready for you on the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Alright, go ahead and pause the video and answer questions number 1 to 7 about the Fugitive Slave Act and Uncle Tom's Cabin. And this is Mr. Zoeller saying have a great day. See you later. Bye-bye.